life-changing event for Robert Stevens, the CEO of Lockheed Martin.
Was it really life-changing? Is a guy that's getting paid to... The really crazy part is that we spent even this much money. It's hard to fathom the amounts that we're talking about, right? But even
without checking where it was going, are being questioned.
Why was the oversight so bad for Afghanistan? Is there any excuse for why the Afghanistan war went on so long? It feels like a really bad mark on NATO's history. Honeywell stock. Notice how well their stock is.
This guy's...
Okay, but what was the dollar amount here?
I've been deep in these documents, each of which is a piece of evidence that helps me piece together a very important question, which is who got rich off this 20-year war that we fought in Afghanistan?
Pretty sure it's all local corrupt officials, right? We poured so much money to that country, it's fucking unreal.
But first,
I think we could have like permanently fixed homelessness in the United States with the amount of money they got allocated to Afghanistan.
Let me tell you what happened on August 15th, 2021. The Taliban had entered Kabul after taking over the entire country of Afghanistan. The war ended as it had begun, with the Taliban in power once again. You probably remember the scenes from the Kabul airport. Remember this with the country of Afghanistan. The war ended as it had begun, with the Taliban in power.
Does this not make anybody nervous? I don't want this dude pointing a rifle at my fucking dick. Holy shit. Jesus.
Power once again. You probably remember the scenes from the Kabul airport. Total chaos as Afghans tried to flee their country. But there's one guy who saw a business opportunity in all of this. This guy, Eric Prince, generously offered to help charter a plane to evacuate people from Kabul. The price tag, $6,500 per person. That was the market price that Eric Prince decided. But this wasn't the first time Eric Prince used the war in Afghanistan to get rich. In fact, this was one of the last of many instances where this guy profited off the Afghan war. And some of the ways he did it were kind of messed up. So after digging through the numbers, the reports, the Senate hearings, all of it, we've established a list of some of the top people who got crazy, stupid, rich off of the war in Afghanistan.
On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against Al-Qaeda terrorist training teams.
Contractor.
$300 million in government contracts.
U.S. defense contractor, our broken system of government contract.
At U.S. federal contractor registration, we know that a government contract is worth more than the dollars awarded.
Here in the United States, we love the free market.
I'm talking about this.
So instead of having the clunky old federal government take care of all things war, we hire a lot of private companies to do it for us. This is companies that make our weapons, feed our soldiers, build our bases, fuel our tanks, and literally fight our wars.
That's Armor 3
yes,
footage.
We have private armies that we call security companies that basically are soldiers for hire. What this allows the government to do is post a job out there, like we need someone to build a road in Afghanistan. And in theory, what happens is a bunch of private companies come together and they all bid on how much it would cost to build this road. And whatever company gives the best price is chosen to go build that road. It's supposed to help the government get the best price. Okay, so where am I going with this? What I want you to understand is that there is this bidding process for private companies to go do things that the government needs. But in wartime, a lot of those processes of bidding go out the window because we're in wartime. So it's like an emergency. So instead, you get a lot of situations where there is no bidding on contracts. The government needs something done in Afghanistan really quickly. This company can do it. Name your price. We'll give you whatever you need.
As a client, the U.S. government is guaranteed to have the funds to pay you and will always pay you.
And it's that very process that allowed people to take advantage of a system to let billions and billions of unaccounted for dollars be poured into private companies. All of this contributed to what a former Secretary of Defense called a culture of endless money inside the Pentagon. Okay, wait, before we go on, I need to thank the sponsor of today's video, which is BetterHelp. I've said this a bunch, I'm gonna keep saying it, which is that I'm a giant supporter of therapy. I think
Did BetterHelp murder people or something? Why do I feel like I have a bad... I feel like there's some drama with BetterHelp. I don't remember.
Therapy is something that is stigmatized, and specifically for me, maybe it's because I was a guy or something, I don't know, but I never got messaging that I was supposed to go to therapy. But I've been going to therapy for 2.5 years now, and it has truly changed my life. BetterHelp is a service that tries to make therapy more accessible by connecting you, if you want therapy, to a network of over 10,000 professionals. And this isn't like a crisis line or a self-help program. This is real licensed therapists giving you therapy done securely over the internet. If you've ever looked for a therapist, you know that it's really hard. And the thing I respect most about BetterHelp, and the reason why I support what they're doing, is because they're trying to make that an easier thing to connect with a therapist. If you don't like the therapist you find, you can easily switch to a new one very easily for free. And BetterHelp allows you to connect with your therapist in between your sessions to get a timely response for whatever you're going through. So I'm a giant fan of BetterHelp. I appreciate them sponsoring this video. They're giving you 10% off your first month if you want to try it out. There's a link in my description. Clicking that link helps support this channel and gets you started on what could be a life-changing thing. I really, really, really support therapy. So check it out. Thank you, BetterHelp, for supporting this video, for supporting my channel. Let's dive back into the video. Okay, now that we understand government contractors, let's get to this list of people who got rich. First up is Robert Stevens, the former CEO of a company called Lockheed Martin. It's a company that manufactures like this helicopter, the Black Hawk. They manufacture missiles, fighter jets, bombs. They manufacture a lot of stuff that we use in war. This company gets a lot of business from the Pentagon. Like in 2020 alone, this company got $75 billion worth of Pentagon contracts. I know that like when we get into billions, it's really hard to like know what that actually means. But just to put it in perspective, the entire budget of our foreign ministry, the State Department, totaled $44 billion. For the entire State Department, all of our diplomacy, $44 billion. And Lockheed Martin alone, this one company, got almost double that to make our weapons.
Okay. I don't know how I feel about comparisons like this. Like, $44 billion for our entire State Department. Okay, well, does the State Department, like, build and manufacture things? Like, because it seems like it would make sense that somebody that is, like, building and manufacturing, like, satellites, planes, missiles, weapons, it's probably going to cost a bit more money than... You know, like I don't know what all the State Department budget goes to, upkeep for the embassies or whatever I don't know where the State Department goes. Whatever the State Department goes to, I don't think they're building airplanes in the State Department. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Maybe they have a hangar somewhere and they do that. But like, it's not surprising to me that a lot more money would go towards like the manufacturing of weapons than to the State Department.
90% of Lockheed's revenue comes from the federal government. Their core business, the thing that keeps them afloat, is war and security. So Robert Stevens became the CEO in 2004. This was 3 years into the war in Afghanistan. And as the war intensified, so did Robert's wallet. And I know this because this is a public company, and all of the compensation for executives is public knowledge to all of us. You may have to dig through some boring documents like the Lockheed Martin proxy statement from the 2000 annual meeting of stockholders on April 27th, 2000, but you can find it. So let's see how Robert and his war business did in the 2000s. So before the war, in the late 90s, the CEO of Lockheed Martin was making around $2 million a year, if you include his salary and bonus. $2 million bucks. It's a pretty good compensation. Okay, but then the war started. Lockheed started to get a ton of contracts, started making more weapons, and look what happens to the CEO's compensation. His salary stays about the same, just over $1 million bucks, but his bonus now jumps up to $3.2 million, bringing his total compensation to around $5 million. This guy's making $5 million bucks. War's doing pretty good for him. Not bad. Let's jump 1 year later. It's now 2006.
I mean, they're bonuses. That makes sense, right? If you're selling more, you probably... I mean...
And Robert Stevens, the CEO of Lockheed Martin, brought in $18 million. Wait, what? From 2 million to 5 million to 18 million. Whoa, Robert Stevens is doing pretty darn good. Okay, but let's keep going. The year after that, Robert Stevens brings in $30 million in his compensation. 30 million, sorry, 31 million. $31 million. Non-equity incentive plan compensation, $8 million. Holy smokes. What? $30 million in compensation. I mean, if we were to like graph that, the war starts here. We're looking at something like this, this, and this. The war was a life-changing event for Robert Stevens, the CEO of Lockheed Martin.
Was it really life-changing? Is a guy that's getting paid $2 to $5 million a year, like, it's not like a fucking, we're not watching a Disney Channel original movie where like an underprivileged minority kid ends up as the CEO of a weapons manufacturer and now his life has changed. Like,
he explained right after the call that he didn't answer the question because either way he loses.
I think that's kind of what I just said.
Say Simon says.
Like I don't understand what the, like, I can finally buy my mom a car. Like, I don't think this was like, I could be wrong. But I don't think that this is a life-changing amount of money for a guy that's the CEO of Lockheed Martin. Just a guess, though.
Okay, so that's our first guy who got super rich. Let's move on to the next one. A guy named Stephen Orenstein. This guy's company, called Supreme Group, was chosen in 2005 to feed U.S. troops in Afghanistan, to provide all the food. I mean, when this guy got the contract, I'm sure the only thing that happened is that his eyes started flashing with money. Since he got the contract, Supreme Foods' business increased 50-fold. Over the course of 6 years, the Defense Department paid Supreme $5.5 billion to deliver food to the troops. $5.5 billion. And it became 90% of his business. 90% of his company was providing food to troops in Afghanistan. I mean, talk about winning the lottery. But remember what I said about emergency funding and contractors? Orenstein realized that he could charge absurd amounts of money for the meals that he was providing to troops. And
I think this whole video is just going to be listing government contractors with their CEOs, man, which I guess is kind of interesting. The really crazy part is that we spent even this much money. It's hard to fathom the amounts that we're talking about, right? But even $5 billion is a drop in the bucket. Like, I'm pretty sure we spent almost $2.5 trillion. $2.5 trillion in Afghanistan. Trillion. We spent a lot of money over there, which is fine. It's fair to know how much people earn from war. Yeah, I guess, but it's like, I just feel like it's a little bit misleading. Because the impression you're always left with after this is like, wow, people make a lot of money off war. Wow, oh my God, war is so profitable. People make so much money off of war. Like, if I had to guess, this is just a guess, but if I had to guess, if we truly lived in a society where the rich people controlled everything, I don't think we would ever be in war ever, because the war fucks our markets up so hard. Like, do a couple of, decent-sized military contractor companies get money? Yeah, sure. But everybody else's market value gets fucked. All the stock market gets fucked. The economy gets fucked. Fucking trade can get fucked. If tariffs and sanctions, like, I don't know if wait, hold on. My brain is falling out through my ears right now. 3 million a year to 30 million a year isn't life-changing. You literally said yourself that old people with 3 million aren't even real millionaires. I get that you're saying cynical about everything lefties critics regards for money, but could you be at least a bit more charitable? Like, fuck, it's actually comical sometimes. If you're in a job where your total compensation is $2 million a year, I don't know if that changing to even $10 million a year is life-changing. Because this is a person who's already making a ton of money. Life-changing, that's not usually how I hear that term used. Maybe you hear that term used that way. But like, even if my current income was 10x'd, I don't know if I would say that's like life-changing money, because I'm already making like a decent amount of money doing everything. Like, same thing, like if you're the CEO, like, well, that is a 5x increase. Yeah, but a 5x increase isn't necessarily always like life-changing.
No one would notice because they were just throwing money at this war. The government contracts just kept coming no matter how pricey his meals were.
There's our beef ravioli.
Ornstein was like, dude, there's no adults in the room. Like, I'm a child in a candy shop.
There's our beef ravioli.
Ornstein was like, dude, there's no adults in the room. Like, I'm a child in a candy shop right now. Let's see how far I can take this. Not only was he charging insane prices for meals, but then he started to create fake subcontracting companies and started to win contracts that were for nothing. And the Pentagon would just pay him a ton of money for doing no work. And what did he do? He just pocketed the cash. He got super, super rich off of this, to the point where he became a billionaire. He got put on the billionaire list or whatever. But eventually he took it way too far and he got caught. And yes, we are now reading a Senate hearing from 2013 called Contracting to Feed U.S. Troops in Afghanistan. How did the U.S. Defense Department end up in a multi-billion-dollar billing dispute? I don't recommend you watch this hearing. It's very boring.
DLA had paid Supreme about $3 billion, including $1.6 billion for food and water and $1.4 billion.
I heard that this was a big problem when it came to Afghanistan, that money was pouring into all sorts of shit for all sorts of reasons, and nobody had any idea what the fuck was happening. There was very little accountability for a lot of the Afghanistan money.
Transportation and storage costs.
The numbers being thrown around in this hearing are insane. The Pentagon overpaid nearly $100 million just in like transportation costs, which, as one congressperson said, that is an astounding amount of money. And then to put it in perspective, she says that that amount would pay for nearly 100,000 children to have access to a Head Start program, which is an early education program in the US. But instead, this taxpayer money went into Ornstein's pocket. Nice one, Stephen. Think of the children. Come on. So what does it look like when someone gets punished for this? Well, here we are in this Senate hearing where the people who gave all of this money without checking where it was going are being questioned.
Why was the oversight so bad for Afghanistan? I don't know, actually. I'm not sure. It was just a lot of money. It was just more money than what needed to be spent, is what it seemed like. I don't know why, though. It's a good question.
When they asked what happened, they say things like this.
The contract management efforts that we applied to this did not keep pace with the changes that we were seeing in our requirements.
Let me translate that for you. What he was really saying is we weren't really paying attention because, war. According to this court document, Stephen eventually did have to pay up $389 million. But let's be honest, he got a little slap on the wrist, but the guy got rich off the Afghan war, which is why he's on this list. Next up is this guy, Eric Prince. This is the guy we talked about at the beginning who was like charging $6,000 to fly people out of Afghanistan.
I don't think any human being who has a heart and soul would support efforts to profit off of people's agony and pain as they're trying to depart a country and fearing for their lives.
He's an ex-Navy SEAL who inherited a bunch of money and decided to start his own private security company called Blackwater. Remember what I said, private security company really means soldiers for hire. This guy trained military and police forces. In fact, he describes his mission for Blackwater as, quote, trying to do for the national security apparatus what FedEx did for the Postal Service. Privatize, make more efficient, get rid of red tape, etc., etc. Kind of a scary thought, but okay. He got his first contract in 2000. It was a small contract, $204,000, to help train the Navy for terrorist attacks. Then 9/11 happened. An absolute tragedy for the American people, but an incredible business opportunity for Eric Prince and his FedEx for the Army. The US was desperate to mobilize their troops for this new kind of warfare, so they turned to Blackwater to help them. The US hired Blackwater to come protect their CIA compounds or to escort VIP diplomats. But wait, let's just get something clear. What are these guys? Are they troops or like military? Technically, no, they're not. But they sure look like troops. I mean, look at these guys. But really, these guys are just like fancy security guards that the government hires and gives them security clearances and sends them to war zones so that they can operate like soldiers under the jurisdiction of a private.
Is there any excuse for why the Afghanistan war went on so long? It feels like a really bad mark on NATO's history. I don't know if the original Article 5 was triggered for 9/11, but I don't think the long-term occupation of Afghanistan was a NATO mission. Was it? Where's Rage Pope? I don't think it was I don't think that was a NATO mission. Because NATO has so many different countries involved, I think that when NATO specifies missions, I think NATO tries to have a very narrow scope in terms of what it's doing to prevent the horrible mission creep that we see with places like Iraq and Afghanistan and the Infinity Wars. I think this is one of the big criticisms of NATO intervention in Libya. NATO intervention in Libya was almost certainly a justifiable thing, but they left right after and the government was still fucked and the country was kind of fucked. But I think the reason why is because NATO generally wants to have a very clearly defined scope of what the mission is, even if that makes that scope a bit too narrow. So most of the criticisms of the NATO intervention in Libya and the ousting of Gaddafi usually stem from the fact that once they left, the country was basically just ran by warlords and was completely fucked. Yeah.
Company, but they're just security guards, so they're not like mercenaries or anything, right? By 2007, the government had given Blackwater over $1 billion in federal contracts. Let me repeat, this little company that provides a private security force went from meager contracts of $200,000 to help train troops to sending troops abroad to actually be in the war zone and getting $1 billion worth of taxpayer money within just a few years. As you can imagine, giving guns and security clearances to a private army might lead to some thorny abuses of power. And in fact, in 2007, the guards of Blackwater were in Iraq, in addition to Afghanistan, and they opened fire on unarmed civilians.
Indiscriminate shootings by Blackwater guards leading to the deaths of civilians.
In a crowded public square, after a car bomb had exploded a mile away, they killed 17 Iraqis and injured 20 more. Blackwater lost their contracts. It was a huge scandal, and it was another instance where there was some accountability. And yet, Eric Prince sold the company and came out on top. Another guy who got really rich off the Afghan war. Oh, and those security guards who opened fire on innocent civilians were tried and convicted. But then, wait for it, they were completely pardoned by Donald Trump. Do we have any faith in humanity? Next up, we've got these two guys. They're nicknamed the War Dogs. There's a movie about them that I haven't seen, but I want to.
Sorry, excuse me. An emergency. Sorry, don't worry, I have to go first. I'm American.
But really, the best thing out there is this Rolling Stone article. These guys were ages 25 and 21 when they started an ammunition company. They bid the Pentagon and won $300 million worth of taxpayer money in contracts. And they were going to supply the Afghan National Army with guns and ammunition. I mean, this is insane. These were like early 20-year-old kids. One of these guys, David, was just a few months earlier a massage therapist, and then was like, I'm going to have a little change of career. I'm going to go sell $300 million worth of guns and ammunition to the federal government so they can fight a war in Afghanistan. These guys got super rich off of this, and soon were living a fancy life with really nice cars and expensive apartments in like Miami. But what they were doing here was buying ammo from China and then selling that to the US government, which is like a giant no-no in arms trading. They eventually got caught, pleaded guilty, and one of them was sentenced to jail for 4 years. So this is a rare case of guys got rich and then they got caught and they actually got punished, which didn't happen to Supreme Food or Eric Prince. The difference is when you're like a 24-year-old kid, you don't have a lot of money and influence, so you can't easily your way out of accountability. But what this story shows you is just how easy.
Hold on. My guess is actually, if we're a little bit less cynical, my guess is that the people that are being held responsible are probably going to depend on how close you are to the actual event that goes wrong. So that first guy, the food guy, actually seems like he did get held accountable. He was fined $400 million. So, I mean, whether you think that was enough or not, I mean, it was a $400 million fine. It was some level of accountability there. For the CEO of Blackwater, I don't know what accountability we're looking for there. Is the claim that the CEO himself ordered those Blackwater guards to go and shoot at... Oh, actually, wait. He might be referring to the fact that Trump pardoned the Blackwater guards, if he's maybe referring to that afterwards, that the guards themselves. But, I mean, it's not like the CEO should necessarily go to jail because, the private military company did some fucked up shit, right? But I mean, my guess is with these kids, these two guys managing this company, they were probably doing a lot of the illegal shit themselves. So, yeah, of course, they're going to get fucked, right? I don't know if they had employees or whatever. If they're, got their hands in everything, of course they're going to get fucked,
easy it was to get in on this culture of endless money within the Pentagon. The massage therapist who had never owned a gun before started an ammunition and gun company and got $300 million for it. Just like a gold rush. Okay, so those are the War Dogs. Next up, we have this guy, Fahim Hashimi. one of the several Afghan nationals who got super rich, part of this group called the 9/11 millionaires. In the early days of the Afghan war, there was huge need for local fixers and translators. The people who got in early helping out US forces got really savvy to how the US was operating, and they quickly realized that they could provide a bunch more local services and make a ton of money. So Fahim started a business that eventually turned into like a media corporation with like TV stations and a construction company and even an airline. His company started racking in like $200 million a year in government contracts. There were a bunch of Afghans who got super rich riding on the coattails of all of this money being poured into the country, which is like, good for them. Their country's been torn apart by outside superpowers for decades. Let them at least get something out of it, for heaven's sake. Next up, we have our very own Congress. Nancy Pelosi and Ted Cruz aren't like arms dealers, but they can still get rich off of war.
Everything is gone. God!
Because if you're a member of Congress, you can buy stocks in defense companies like Lockheed Martin, and a lot of them do. At least 47 members of Congress and their spouses hold between $2 million and $6.7 million worth of stocks in top defense companies. Oh, and it's not partisan. Of the 36 House members who hold stock in military contracts, 20 are Republican and 16 are Democrats. It's almost split in half. I mean, let's get into the details here. Like,
I feel like there's a couple big holders here. Like Ronnie Jackson, a Republican from Texas, has $1,000 in Howmet Aerospace. Is that really? And even the 50 grand is like okay, like $50,000 is this like money worth talking about? This Kevin dude's got quite a bit of money here. Debbie's got quite a bit, but
top defense companies. Oh, and it's not partisan. Of the 36 House members who hold stock in military contracts, 20 are Republican and 16 are Democrats. It's almost split in half. I mean, let's get into the details here. Like, which of the congressmen have the most money invested in defense companies? Good question. The winner for this year of Who's Getting Rich Off War is Kevin Hearn, a Republican from Oklahoma, who owns over $1 million in stock from defense contractors. $880,000 alone in Honeywell, which is an aerospace contractor that Congress really seems to love. And notice how well their stock has done, especially since 2009, when Obama sent a bunch of new troops to Afghanistan. I mean, this is a law.
Honeywell stock. Notice how well their stock has done since 2009 to we'll go till December. It's 480% in 2019. Compared to 260% for the markets. Okay, so it outperformed.
Maker who has to give up 2009.
It's kind of weird to say
really
that that statement, especially since 2009, because technically everything in the market did really well, especially since like 2008, 2009, because that's when we hit a bottom and we started to rebound like crazy. But whatever.
Love. And notice how well their stock has done.
Honeywell also makes fans and air conditioners. Oh, sure.
Especially since 2009, when Obama sent a bunch of new troops to Afghanistan. I mean, this is a lawmaker who has to give approval when we go to war, and he stands to gain if we do. But wait, the conflict of interest gets worse when you look at somebody like Senator Gary Peters, a Democratic senator from Michigan, who is a member of the Armed Services Committee, which is the committee that authorizes the Pentagon's budget. Here's his financial disclosure. He's invested in a lot of things, including Raytheon Technology Corporation. Raytheon is a major government contractor for wartime things. This guy gives money to the Pentagon to do war things with private contractors, and he has invested in the private contractors. In July, this guy's...
Okay, but what was the dollar amount here? It's $15,000. Gary Peters' net worth. Wow, do you think it's even listed? He had assets between 1.7 and 6.3 million dollars at the end of 2014. Is this guy really making decisions about like the future of the military companies in the United States or like contracts based on his $15,000 investment?
Member of the Armed Services Committee, which is the committee that authorizes the Pentagon's budget. Here's his financial disclosure. He's invested in a lot of things, including Raytheon Technology Corporation. Raytheon is a major government contractor for wartime things. This guy gives money to the Pentagon to do war things with private contractors, and he has invested in the private contractors. In July, this guy's committee voted to increase defense spending by $24 billion, which is more than President Biden even proposed. So in very direct terms, this guy is voting to put more money in his pocket. That is how our system works. Here's another financial disclosure of a senator who's on a committee that deals with cybersecurity and protection. She holds stock in 6 defense companies, with most most of her money being invested in an IT contractor. Do you get it? IT contractor that she is invested in. Cybersecurity committee that she uses to vote to give money to the thing she's invested in. It's just like, come on. Ugh. Okay, so that's our list. And let me be clear that this is not the exhaustive list of everyone who got rich. There are so many more people who got rich. There are so many more people who abused the system. We will never know their names. We will never hear about them because they didn't get caught. In the end, the Pentagon spent $14 trillion. $14 trillion. Between 30 and 50% of that went to private companies, military contractors, companies that give huge payout, huge compensation to the top leaders. That's like $5 trillion worth of taxpayer money going to fatten the pockets of these corporations. And for what? What did we get? We now know that it didn't do much for this country and its people. 20 years later, the country is falling back to where it started. But what it did do is it made these people really, really, really rich. Good for them. Okay, I'm gonna go try to not be depressed about how our democracy works. See ya.